Welcome, curious minds, to the deep dive. Today, we're embarking on a journey into a concept that, well, it profoundly shapes our lives, often in ways we barely recognize: emotional intelligence.
Hmm.
Our mission as we delve into the insightful work of Daniel Goleman's emotional intelligence is to unpack what this powerful concept truly is, why it holds far more sway over our destinies than, everything from our personal well-being to the very health of our society.
It's a journey that begins not with some complex theory, but with a simple yet uh, utterly captivating everyday encounter. Picture this: New York City, Madison Avenue, way back in 1963 on a sweltering August afternoon.
Oh, I can picture it. A bus just crawling through that notorious gridlock, and the
Right.
mood inside, well, as you'd expect, probably thick with irritability.
Exactly. Sullen, weary passengers, all just stank with that suffocating traffic. Not exactly a scene, ripe for a breakthrough.
Right.
Yet a breakthrough is precisely what happened. The bus driver, instead of mirroring the general gloom, started this incredibly lively running monologue about the city.
Really? Like what?
He was pointing out a fantastic sale at a store, highlighting a wonderful exhibit at a museum, even recommended a new movie that had just opened. Just sharing these little gems.
And what's truly remarkable, it sounds like, is how his genuine delight in the city's possibilities was, well, simply infectious.
Completely. By the time passengers reached their stops and got off that bus, they had quite literally shaken off the sullen shell they'd boarded with.
Wow.
And when the driver cheerfully called out, "So long, have a great day," every single person responded with a genuine smile. It's almost unbelievable, isn't it?
It really is. A small moment, but yeah.
And what makes this anecdote so powerful is that the author, who at the time had just finished his doctorate in psychology, carried the memory of this small, transformative encounter for nearly 2 decades.
2 decades.
Yeah. He realized that back then, psychological science had paid very little attention to the mechanics of emotion that allowed such a, well, magical shift.
So this ordinary bus driver became, in essence, an urban peacemaker.
That's a great way to put it.
He possessed this almost wizard-like power to transmute sullen irritability into delight, this quiet ability to soften and open hearts. It makes you wonder about the invisible forces that truly shape our daily interactions, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
And this story highlights a profound oversight. For a very long time, we Homo sapiens, the thinking species, we placed our intellect, our rational thought, on a pedestal.
Right, that was the defining feature.
We believed it was the primary determinant of our success and our very identity. But as we explore today, this focus on pure intellect can be incredibly short-sighted because, as the source material so eloquently states, intelligence can come to nothing when the emotions hold sway.
And that's precisely our mission with this deep dive, to pull back the curtain on that oversight. We're going to explore the surprising mechanics of emotion, uncover the crucial skills of emotional mastery, and really delve into the profound implications these skills have for individuals and for society as a whole.
Hmm.
It's a journey into what truly makes us human beyond just how smart we are in the traditional sense.
Exactly.
So let's dive right into this core idea because it challenges a fundamental belief that, well, many of us grew up with. We've long defined ourselves by our intellect as Homo sapiens, the thinking species.
Right.
We've placed rationality on this high pedestal, believing it to be the ultimate driver of human progress and individual achievement.
And yet, as you just pointed out, this view of human nature is sadly short-sighted. The truth is, intelligence can come to nothing when the emotions hold sway. Our emotional mind, that gut feeling, it's incredibly powerful and often impulsive.
Yeah.
It can, and frequently does, override even the most thoughtful, reflective, rational mind.
It's a bit like that common folk distinction between the heart and the head, isn't it?
Exactly.
Knowing something is right in your heart feels like a deeper, more certain conviction than just thinking it's right with your rational mind.
There's a fascinating interplay here. The more intense the feeling, the more dominant that emotional mind becomes, and the more ineffectual our rational mind often feels. It's almost like logic just gets drowned out by the emotional tide.
Yeah, washed away.
But this isn't a flaw in our design. It's actually an arrangement that stems from eons of evolutionary advantage.
Right, survival.
In primal situations where our lives were in peril, pausing to meticulously think through options could literally cost us our lives. Rapid, intuitive, emotion-guided responses were crucial for survival, even if they sometimes bypassed our logical reasoning.
That quick, instinctive reaction.
Was often the difference between life and death, absolutely.
And that evolutionary wiring leads us directly to a truly surprising limitation in our traditional understanding of success. For generations, we've equated high IQ with a surefire path to achievement.
The golden ticket.
Yeah. But the evidence, when you really look at it, it paints a very different picture.
Absolutely.
Huh.
The truth is, there are widespread exceptions to the rule that IQ predicts success. When you look at the factors determining life success, IQ, at best, contributes only about 20%.
Only 20.
Only 20%.
Yeah.
That leaves a staggering 80%, a huge piece of the pie to what our sources call other forces.
80%. That's
Yeah.
significant. Even Herrnstein and Murray, in their influential book, The Bell Curve, which really emphasized IQ,
Right, heavily.
they acknowledge its limited link to high-level achievements. They point out that while a student with a low SAT math score might not become a mathematician, if they dream of running a business or becoming a U.S. senator or even making $1 million, they shouldn't give up.
Yeah, the link between those test scores and specific real-world achievements is dwarfed by the totality of other characteristics that he brings to life. It's about so much more than just a number.
It really is.
And to truly grasp this, consider the anecdote of the Amherst College student. This individual had achieved 5 perfect 800 scores on the SAT and other achievement tests before even setting foot on campus.
Wow. Incredible scores.
Yet despite these formidable intellectual abilities, he spent most of his time just hanging out, staying up late, frequently missing classes.
Oh, dear.
It took him nearly 10 years to finally earn his degree. His incredibly high IQ in this instance clearly didn't guarantee academic success, let alone life success.
That's a really powerful example. And it's not an isolated one, is it? There's that Harvard study from the 1940s.
Right, the longitudinal study. They followed 95 male students well into middle age. And these men had a wider range of IQs than you typically find in Ivy League schools today, which makes the findings even more compelling.
And what did they find?
The study revealed that the men with the highest test scores in college were not necessarily more successful in terms of salary, productivity, or status than their lower-scoring peers. Nor did they report greater life satisfaction or happiness in their friendships, family life, or romantic relationships.
Yeah.
It really challenges that direct correlation we often just assume exists.
It completely undermines it.
This only reinforces the point. As Karen Arnold, a professor of education at Boston University who tracks valedictorians, explains it, to know that a person is a valedictorian is to know only that he or she is exceedingly good at achievement as measured by grades.
Okay.
It tells you nothing about how they react to the vicissitudes of life. It's about how they handle the ups and downs, the unexpected challenges that life inevitably throws their way.
So if IQ alone offers so little to explain the wildly different destinies of people with similar academic backgrounds and opportunities, what is that missing 80%?
Well, what we're discovering and what Goleman lays out is that emotional aptitude is a kind of meta-ability.
Meta-ability.
Yeah, it's like the overarching framework that determines how well we can use all of our other skills, including our raw intellect. It's the underlying force that allows everything else to either flourish or, unfortunately, falter.
Okay, that makes sense.
This insight brings us to a different kind of intelligence altogether, one that stretches far beyond the traditional 3 R's of reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Mm-hmm.
It's an idea pioneered by Howard Gardner with his theory of multiple intelligences.
Right, broadening our understanding of human capability.
Exact.
And one of the most compelling examples from the source material brings this to life beautifully. 4-year-old Judy.
Ah, yes.
To a casual observer, Judy might have appeared like a wallflower, often hanging back from the action at playtime.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, Judy was a keen observer of the social politics in her preschool classroom. She was perhaps the most sophisticated of her playmates in her insights into the tides of feeling within the others. She had this incredible ability to read the room.
Her unique sophistication became brilliantly apparent during something called the classroom game.
Okay.
This involved a dollhouse replica of her preschool, complete with little stick figures that had small photos of the students and teachers as heads.
Cute.
Yeah. When Judy's teacher asked her to place each child in the part of the room where they liked to play most, Judy did it with complete accuracy.
Wow.
And then, when asked about each child with the ones they liked to play with most, Judy perfectly matched up the best friends for the entire class.
She had a perfect social map of her class.
Exactly.
A level of perceptiveness that was truly exceptional for a 4-year-old. These aren't just cute observations about a child. These people skills are precisely what, in later life, allow someone like Judy to blossom into a star in fields ranging from sales and management to diplomacy.
Absolutely. They are the bedrock of success in human interactions.
This aligns perfectly with Gardner's core definitions, doesn't it? He talked about interpersonal intelligence.
Right. The capacities to discern and respond appropriately to the moods, temperaments, motivations, and desires of other people. That's about understanding others,
And then intrapersonal intelligence.
which is the key to self-knowledge, involving access to one's own feelings and the ability to discriminate among them and draw upon them to guide behavior, understanding yourself.
What's truly fascinating is how Gardner himself came to recognize the profound importance of these emotional and relationship abilities in the rough and tumble of life.
Yeah, he famously stated that many people with IQs of 160 work for people with IQs of 100, if the former have poor interpersonal intelligence and the latter have a high one.
That completely flips the traditional hierarchy, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
And he concluded unequivocally that in the day-to-day world, no intelligence is more important than the interpersonal.
Wow.
If you lack it, he noted, you'll make poor choices about who to marry, what job to take, and so on. It's a foundational intelligence for life's most significant decisions.
This realization really paved the way for other theorists to delve deeper, didn't it? Like Peter Salovey.
Yes, Peter Salovey, a Yale psychologist, he mapped out in incredible detail the ways in which we can bring intelligence to our emotions. He really brought the idea of emotional intelligence into much clearer focus for modern psychology.
But it's worth noting, this isn't an entirely brand new concept.
No, not entirely. Back in the 1920s and 30s, E.L. Thorndike, an influential psychologist, proposed social intelligence as an aspect of IQ, the ability to understand others and act wisely in human relations.
But it kind of faded.
It did, surprisingly. By 1960, influential intelligence textbooks had dismissed it as a useless concept.
Really? Why?
It's hard to say exactly, maybe measurement difficulties or just a shift in focus. But Salovey, and of course Goleman's work later, really resurrected and redefined this vital area, bringing it back into the mainstream of our understanding.
Okay, so now that we understand the surprising limitations of IQ and sort of the conceptual emergence of emotional intelligence, let's pull back the curtain even further. Let's really dive into how emotions work within us.
Yeah, the inner workings.
The anatomy and the management of our emotional responses.
This brings us back to that fundamental folk distinction we mentioned earlier, the heart and the head.
Right.
We intuitively understand that there are two distinct, though interconnected, modes of operation in our minds: the emotional mind and the rational mind.
The emotional mind is characterized as impulsive and powerful, if sometimes illogical. It's that spontaneous gut feeling, that immediate surge of joy or, fear.
It stands in stark contrast to the rational mind, which is thoughtful, able to ponder and reflect. One is quick and reactive, the other is slower and deliberate.
And the relationship between them is key.
Absolutely. The more intense a feeling becomes, the more dominant the emotional mind grows, and the more ineffectual our rational mind often appears. It's as if the flood of emotions simply overwhelms our ability to think clearly.
But again, not a design flaw.
Not at all. In fact, it's an evolutionary masterpiece. For eons, in situations of peril, pausing to think could quite literally cost us our lives. Our emotions and intuitions were wired to guide instantaneous, life-saving responses, even if they sometimes bypassed our logical reasoning.
And sometimes that instantaneous response can be devastating, leading to what's known as an emotional hijacking.
Yes. As Horace Walpole famously put it, life is a comedy for those who think and a tragedy for those who feel. A truly tragic example of this is the case of Richard Robles from 1963. Robles, a paroled burglar, intended for one last break-in to support his family.
Okay.
He entered an apartment where he encountered Janice Wiley. As he was leaving, her roommate arrived. Robles began to tie her up too, but Wiley made a critical mistake. She threatened to remember his face and report him.
Oh, no.
In that moment, Robles panicked, completely losing control. He later lamented, "I just went bananas, my head just exploded." In a sudden, uncontrollable frenzy of rage and fear, he viciously attacked both women, clubbing, slashing, and stabbing them in a horrific double murder. It's a chilling, extreme example of what happens when emotions completely surge out of control, overwhelming all reason.
So how does that happen in the brain? What's the mechanism?
Well, in the brain's intricate architecture, the amygdala is central to this. Think of it like a highly sensitive internal alarm system, constantly scanning for threats.
Okay, the brain's alarm.
Exactly. When it perceives danger, it bypasses the normal thinking circuits and immediately sends urgent messages to every major part of the brain, triggering a cascade of physiological effects.
Like what kind of effects?
It releases powerful stress hormones, mobilizes our body's movement centers, activates our cardiovascular system, muscles, and gut.
So a total body response.
Total body response. It also heightens our senses, fixes our facial expression in fear, freezes unrelated movements, speeds up our heart rate, raises our blood pressure, and slows our breathing.
Yeah.
Our attention becomes absolutely riveted on the source of the fear, and our memory systems are instantly shuffled to retrieve any knowledge relevant to the emergency.
It's an all-encompassing, lightning-fast bodily preparation for fight or flight.
Precisely. And Joseph Ledoux's revolutionary research shed light on the neural pathways behind this. He discovered a direct route for sensory information.
A shortcut.
Kind of, yeah. It travels from the thalamus, which is like a sensory relay station, through an incredibly fast, direct connection straight to the amygdala before it even reaches the neocortex, that's our thinking brain.
So the alarm gets the message first.
Yes. A second, slightly slower signal then goes to the neocortex, allowing for more detailed processing. But the amygdala already has the initial alert.
And this direct pathway is crucial. Ledoux's rat experiment demonstrated it powerfully, right?
It did. Even when the auditory cortex of rats was destroyed, they still learned to fear a tone paired with an electric shock. The sound went directly from ear to thalamus to amygdala, entirely bypassing the higher thinking brain.
Wow.
This proves the amygdala's capacity for independent emotional learning operating on its own.
So the purpose of this emergency route
Is to allow for instantaneous, life-saving responses. The amygdala can have a spring to action immediately, giving us that split-second advantage, while the slightly slower but more fully informed neocortex unfolds its more refined plan.
So that neural arrangement directly explains the power of emotion to overwhelm rationality.
Exactly. It's an ancient survival mechanism that, while sometimes problematic in modern life, was once absolutely essential.
So where does our rational mind fit into this picture? How do we manage this?
Well, the prefrontal cortex plays a vital role as the efficient manager of emotion.
The manager. Oh.
It works with the amygdala, coordinating our responses and dictating emotional reactions. Critically, it also dampens excessive amygdala signals, acting like a wise parent stopping an impulsive child from grabbing something without thinking.
So it's the brain's brake pedal for emotional reactivity.
That's a great analogy. Emotional hijackings, then, are essentially the triggering of the amygdala and a failure to activate the neocortical processes that usually keep emotional response in balance.
The manager fails, the brakes fail.
Right. In these moments, the rational mind is utterly swamped by the emotional flood, leaving us unable to think clearly or act rationally.
But it's not always a battle, right? Ideally, emotion and thought work in harmony.
Ideally, yes. The intricate connections between the limbic system, where the amygdala resides, and the neocortex are the hub of these battles or cooperative treaties struck between head and heart, thought and feeling. This circuitry highlights why emotion is so crucial for effective thought, both in wise decision-making and simply in thinking clearly day to day.
Okay, how does that connection work?
Well, consider working memory, which our prefrontal cortex is responsible for. It's our brain's capacity for paying attention and holding essential facts in mind to complete a task.
Right, like remembering a phone number while you dial it.
Exactly. But circuits connecting the emotional limbic brain to the prefrontal lobes mean that strong emotions like intense anxiety or anger can create what's called neural static.
Neural static, like interference.
Precisely. And that neural static literally sabotages the prefrontal lobe's ability to maintain working memory. That's why we often say we just can't think straight when we're emotionally upset.
Okay, that makes perfect sense.
And it's why continual emotional distress can even create deficits in a child's intellectual abilities, crippling their capacity to learn effectively over time. The emotional state directly impacts the ability to process and retain information.
So our emotions are not just accessories. They are absolutely essential for rationality.
Absolutely. In the intricate dance of feeling and thought, the emotional faculty guides our moment-to-moment decisions, working hand in hand with the rational mind, ultimately enabling or disabling thought itself.
They are not separate entities.
No, but intertwined partners in our mental life. It seems we truly have two brains, or at least two distinct operating modes of mind, and two different kinds of intelligence, rational and emotional. How we navigate life is determined by both.
Intellect cannot work at its best without emotional intelligence.
Exactly. When these two partners, the limbic system and neocortex, the amygdala and prefrontal lobes, interact well, emotional intelligence rises, and with it, intellectual ability. They are, in essence, full partners.
All right, so we've established the critical role of emotional intelligence and the fascinating interplay between our emotional and rational minds. Now, let's move into the practical side. How do we actually master our inner world?
Yeah, the how-to.
What are the specific components of emotional intelligence, and how can they be cultivated and strengthened within us?
This is where Peter Celebi's framework becomes incredibly useful. He identified 5 key domains of emotional intelligence, providing a clear roadmap for understanding and developing these crucial skills.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first domain is knowing one's emotions, or self-awareness. This is absolutely foundational for psychological insight and true self-understanding.
Being aware of your feelings as they happen.
Exactly. Catching them in the moment. Think
Yeah.
about it. If you can't notice your true feelings, you're essentially constantly at their mercy, reacting without understanding.
Right.
People who have greater certainty about their feelings are truly better pilots of their lives, making sure decisions about everything from who to marry to what job to take. It's an ongoing attention to one's internal states.
So it's like metacognition, but for feelings.
Yeah.
Meta mood.
You could call it that. Goleman prefers self-awareness. It's a non-reactive, non-judgmental attention to our inner states.
Hmm.
To illustrate this, Suzanne Miller, a psychologist at Temple University, developed a test using an airplane turbulence scenario. Are you the type who buries yourself in a book, distracting yourself, or do you anxiously watch the flight attendants for signs of panic? The way we choose to pay attention or not shapes our emotional experience.
And the interesting part is those who tune in to their distress by attending so carefully can actually amplify their own reactions.
Making their emotions seem even more intense.
Conversely, those who tune out by distracting themselves notice less about their own reactions, thereby minimizing the emotional experience. It highlights the profound power of our attention in shaping our emotional reality.
Whether we intend it or not, this fundamental ability to know and name feelings is vital. Consider the condition called alexithymia.
Alexithymia.
Literally means no words for feelings. People with alexithymia struggle to know or verbalize their emotions, leading to baffling and overwhelming experiences.
Can you give an example?
Yeah, there's a case of a patient who cried herself to sleep after seeing a movie about a woman dying of cancer. But she was bewildered when her therapist suggested it might be connected to her own mother's cancer. She could only say she felt awful, but couldn't clarify beyond that.
So the core problem isn't that they don't feel, but they can't know or label the feelings?
Exactly. They utterly lack that fundamental skill of self-awareness. As Henry Roth observed in his novel, if you could put words to what you felt, it was yours. The corollary, then, is that if you have no words for feelings, you can't truly make them your own.
And they think this might be caused by a disconnection.
Yes, possibly a disconnection between the limbic system, where emotions are processed, and the neocortex, particularly its verbal centers.
Another fascinating case that underlines the importance of feeling in decision-making is Elliot.
Elliot's case is striking. After surgery to remove a tumor behind his forehead, Elliot seemed intellectually brilliant as ever, tested high on IQ, but he lost all sense of priority and became unable to make even simple decisions. He was incapable of choosing a date for an appointment, arguing endlessly for and against every possible time slot, but lacking any sense of how he felt about any of the options.
He couldn't feel a preference.
None. This demonstrates the crucial role of gut feeling in navigating life's endless personal decisions. Without the awareness of his own feelings, Elliot had no preferences, no internal compass.
Decisions like choosing a career or a spouse, you can't just logic those out.
Exactly. They require a deeper emotional wisdom garnered from past experiences. It reveals that reason without feeling is blind.
So these gut feelings, these somatic markers.
Yes, that's Antonio Damasio's term. These limbic-driven visceral surges act as automatic alarms for danger or opportunity. They guide crucial life decisions beyond sheer rationality, allowing us to quickly eliminate or pursue a course of action with greater confidence and narrow down our choices.
So being attuned to those subtle feelings is key to sounder personal decision-making.
Truly key.
Okay, so that's self-awareness. Moving on to the second domain,
Managing emotions. This builds directly on self-awareness and involves handling feelings appropriately, soothing oneself, shaking off rampant anxiety, gloom, or irritability.
Emotional regulation.
Right. People who are poor in this ability often find themselves constantly battling feelings of distress, feeling overwhelmed. In contrast, those who excel at this skill bounce back far more quickly from life's setbacks and upsets. It's about emotional resilience.
Let's talk about managing anger, because that seems like a big one for many people.
It is. Tice found it's the mood people are worst at controlling. It's arguably the most intransigent and seductive of the negative emotions, promising a quick release that often doesn't materialize.
And there are myths around it, right? Like venting is good.
Big myth. Research actually contradicts this. Dolph Zillman's experiments showed that provocation, followed by an upsetting film, often led to retaliation proportional to the prior emotional arousal. There's a distinct rage rush.
Rage rush.
Yeah, a surge of stress hormones that generates a quick burst of energy for vigorous action, lasting minutes. And critically, anger tends to build on itself, unhampered by reason, often escalating into violence.
So venting doesn't help.
Crucially, Zillman found that ventilating anger is one of the worst ways to cool down. Outbursts actually pump up the emotional brain's arousal, leaving people feeling more angry, not less.
So what is effective?
Far more effective is to first cool down, step away from the situation, maybe distract yourself, and then, in a calmer, more constructive or assertive manner, confront the person to settle the dispute.
Like that Tibetan teacher advised, don't suppress it, but don't act on it.
Exactly. Simple distraction, like reading or watching TV, can help break the angry train of thought, unlike activities like shopping or eating, which allow rumination to continue.
Okay. Next, let's consider soothing anxiety or worry. This can feel like that endless loop of low-grade melodrama.
Oh yeah. Where one concern seamlessly leads to the next and back again. Think of it. A strange muffler sound outside leads to worry about a college fund, which spirals into bad grades, then anxieties about college admissions. It's a never-ending, exhausting cycle.
Does worry serve any purpose?
Well, it does have an evolutionary root in vigilance for danger, acting as a mental rehearsal for what might go wrong. But chronic worry often doesn't lead to solutions.
Right, you just spin your wheels.
Instead, worriers tend to ruminate on the danger itself, feeling an addictive pull to it. They often wrongly credit worry for preventing evils that never actually happen, which just reinforces the cycle.
So how do you break that cycle?
The good news is that Thomas Borkovec, a psychologist, found simple steps to control chronic worry, even though it often comes unbidden like a low-grade amygdala episode.
Okay.
The first is self-awareness, catching worries as early as possible, recognizing their triggers.
Yeah.
Then comes cognitive restructuring, actively challenging worrisome thoughts and consciously contemplating alternatives. And finally, active relaxation techniques.
So challenging the thoughts, calming the body.
Right. For severe cases like phobias or panic disorder, medication may offer some relief, but therapy is still needed to truly retrain emotional circuitry and break the worry habit.
Okay. The third emotional competency is managing melancholy or sadness.
Yeah, this is arguably the single mood people generally put the most effort into shaking off. But it's important to understand that not all sadness should be escaped.
It has a function.
Melancholy, in its milder forms, actually has benefits. It enforces a reflective retreat, focuses our attention on what was lost, and saps energy for new endeavors, allowing for a crucial period of mourning and psychological adjustment.
This is distinct from full-blown clinical depression, though.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
William Styron described depression as a dank joylessness, a deep confusion, and a mind dominated by anarchic distortions. That's very different. For ordinary melancholy, common ineffective strategies include staying alone, which often adds loneliness,
Right.
or socializing only to ruminate on what caused the sadness. These actions can actually prolong the negative mood.
So what works better?
More effective strategies for managing everyday sadness include socializing for distraction, engaging in active distractions like reading, watching uplifting TV, playing video games, or doing puzzles, and even simply sleeping or engaging in daydream.
Things that shift your focus.
Exactly. The most effective activities are those that genuinely shift your mood, exciting, funny, or uplifting experiences. A word of caution, though. Studies have found that heavy TV watchers are generally more depressed after watching TV than before.
Interesting.
So the type of content really matters. Mindless distraction might not be enough.
Good point. Okay, now to the third major domain.
Yeah.
Motivating oneself.
Yes. This is about marshaling our emotions in service of a goal, encompassing self-control, zeal, and persistence.
Like those Olympic athletes?
Exactly. Olympic athletes, world-class musicians, chess grandmasters. Their unifying trait isn't just raw talent, but their profound ability to motivate themselves to pursue relentless training routines.
Which often start really young.
Yes, these rigorous routines often must begin in childhood to achieve world-class levels, demanding incredible emotional discipline.
A classic demonstration of this is Walter Mischel's famous marshmallow test.
Ah, the marshmallow test. Iconic. 4-year-olds were given a simple choice. One marshmallow now, or two if they waited a few minutes for the experimenter to return.
And the kids who waited.
Showed dramatic differences when tracked 12 to 14 years later as adolescents.
How so?
Those who had successfully delayed gratification were consistently found to be more socially competent, personally effective, self-assertive, and better able to cope with life's frustrations. They were less prone to stress, embraced challenges instead of giving up, and were self-reliant, trustworthy, and dependable.
And still able to delay gratification years later.
Yes. More than a decade later, they were still able to delay gratification in pursuit of their larger goals, a trait that proved remarkably consistent.
But here's the really astonishing finding. The SAT scores.
Yes, the so what for traditional understanding of intelligence. The third of children who grabbed the marshmallow most eagerly had an average combined SAT score of 1052, but the third who waited longest had an average combined score of 1262.
A staggering 210-point difference.
Right. This ability to delay gratification at age 4 was twice as powerful a predictor of their SAT scores as their IQ at age 4.
That's mind-blowing. It profoundly suggests that this capacity to control impulse contributes powerfully to intellectual potential, quite apart from IQ itself.
And it's also a powerful predictor of later delinquency. It highlights that intellectual potential is far more complex than just a simple IQ score. It's deeply intertwined with self-regulation.
Then there's the issue of test anxiety.
Ah, yes. Richard Alpert and Ralph Haber's research in the 1960s identified two kinds of anxious students: those whose anxiety sabotages performance,
What cripples them?
and those who actually thrive under stress. The irony is that the very apprehension that can motivate some students to study hard can completely sabotage others, leading to a paralysis of thought.
So for the overly anxious ones.
Pre-test apprehension interferes with clear thinking and memory, making it hard to study effectively, and then disrupts mental clarity during the test itself. The sheer number of worries reported during a test directly predicts poor performance.
The mental resources consumed by worrying.
Simply detract from resources available for processing information, creating unfortunate self-fulfilling prophecies. Even mild mood optimism, as Martin Seligman defines it, is a strong expectation that, in general, things will turn out all right, despite setbacks. It acts as a powerful buffer against apathy, hopelessness, and depression.
And it's linked to how you explain failures.
Exactly. Optimism is defined by one's explanatory style. Optimists tend to attribute failures to changeable external factors. I had a bad day. That approach didn't work. Rather than fixed personal flaws. I'm just not smart enough.
So they see setbacks as temporary and specific.
Right. Optimists respond actively, planning and seeking help, while pessimists often do nothing, attributing setbacks to unchangeable personal deficits.
And this has profound real-world implications that Penn freshmen study.
Yes. A study of 500 University of Pennsylvania freshmen found optimism scores were a better predictor of their first-year grades than their SAT scores or high school grades.
Better than SATs, wow.
Seligman noted that while entrance exams measure raw talent, explanatory style tells you who gives up. It's that crucial combination of talent and the ability to keep going in the face of defeat that ultimately leads to success.
And that insurance salesman study at MetLife is another compelling example.
Absolutely. Taking rejection with grace is essential in sales. The optimistic new salesman sold 37% more insurance in their first 2 years and quit at half the rate of their pessimistic counterparts.
Huge difference.
What's more, a special group of applicants,
Yeah.
high on optimism but failing normal screening tests, actually outsold the pessimists by 21% in year 1 and 57% in year 2.
So optimism beat the standard tests.
In terms of sales performance, yes. When an optimist hears no, they reframe it, maybe wrong approach or a bad mood, allowing them to adapt and try again. Pessimists despair and give up, while optimists consistently generate hope.
And the good news is that both optimism and hope can be learned.
Yes, stemming from self-efficacy, that deep belief in one's mastery over life events, it's not necessarily fixed.
Finally, under motivation, we have the concept of flow state.
Yes, popularized by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. This is a state of completely focused absorption where performance becomes effortlessly high. It's that feeling of being in the zone where time seems to disappear.
How do you get into flow?
You can enter flow by intensely focusing on the task at hand, or by engaging in a skilled task that slightly taxes your ability. It's that delicate zone between boredom and anxiety.
The sweet spot.
Exactly. If it's too easy, you're bored. Too hard, you're anxious. Flow is that sweet spot, the optimal state for learning and performance.
And what's happening in the brain during flow?
Neuroscience reveals that in flow, there's actually decreased cortical activity in the brain, a state of cortical efficiency. Well-practiced moves require less brain effort, freeing up mental resources.
So it's efficient, effortless, peak performance.
Right. It's remarkable because flow allows people to tackle highly challenging tasks with apparent ease. It fundamentally shows that learning at its best happens when children are drawn to something they genuinely love, pushing their limits in a pleasurable way, leading to deep intrinsic motivation rather than external pressures.
Okay, moving to the fourth domain, recognizing emotions in others. This is empathy.
Yes, empathy, the capacity to truly know how another feels. This skill is absolutely vital across a vast array of life arenas, from success in sales and management to the intimacy of romance, the challenges of parenting, the call to compassion, and even effective political action.
And its absence is chilling.
Terribly so. Tragically seen in criminal psychopaths, rapists, and child molesters.
A key aspect of empathy is reading nonverbal cues.
Definitely. The subtle shifts in tone of voice, gestures, facial expressions. Robert Rosenthal at Harvard devised the PONS test, the profile of nonverbal sensitivity, where people tried to detect emotion from specific blanked-out channels in video clips.
Testing that sensitivity.
Yes, it revealed the nuanced skill involved in truly understanding what another person is feeling without them saying a single word.
And empathy development starts incredibly early.
Almost at birth. Infants feel sympathetic distress even before full self-awareness, crying when they hear another child's tears. By about 1 year, they start to distinguish their misery from others, though they might still be a little confused.
Like bringing their own mom to comfort a friend.
Exactly. Ignoring the friend's actual mother. Toddlers diverge from here.
Yeah.
Some, like Jenny in the book, become keenly aware, offering cookies and patting hair, while others seem to tune out entirely.
And parental influence plays a huge role here.
Massive role.
Yeah.
Studies by Marian Radke-Yarrow and Carolyn Zahn-Waxler showed children were significantly more empathic when discipline focused on the distress their misbehavior caused. Look how sad you've made her feel, rather than just a simple, that was naughty.
Pointing out the impact.
Yes. Children also naturally imitate the empathic responses they observe in their parents.
Daniel Stern coined the term attunement for this.
Yes, attunement. That tacit rhythm of a relationship. Think of how mothers attune to their infant's delight or excitement, matching their level of arousal and mirroring their expressions. This happens about once a minute and sends powerful messages of emotional connection.
Laying the foundation.
Laying the fundamental foundation for emotional security and the child's ability to form healthy attachments later in life.
Conversely, a lack of attunement
Can have significant lifetime costs. A study of criminals who committed the cruelest and most violent crimes found that a common characteristic of their early lives was being shuttled from foster home to foster home or raised in orphanages, suggesting severe emotional neglect and little opportunity for genuine attunement.
But paradoxically, abuse can sometimes lead to hyperalertness.
It can. Intense and sustained emotional abuse can lead to a kind of hyperalertness to others' emotions, a post-traumatic vigilance. This is typical of psychologically abused children who, as adults, might suffer from borderline personality disorder. They are often remarkably gifted at sensing what others feel, though often in a painful or distorted way.
And the neurology of empathy offers fascinating insights, too.
It does. Early clues came from patients with frontal lobe lesions who couldn't understand the emotional tone of voice. They couldn't tell if someone was being sarcastic or genuinely grateful from their voice alone. Monkey research, with specific neurons in the visual cortex firing only for certain facial expressions, suggests that empathy is a given of biology, that it's a hardwired capacity to some degree.
And Levinson's research on married couples.
Yes, showing a correlation between their physiological responses and their guesses of a partner's feelings during heated discussions suggests a similar physiological basis in humans. We literally feel with others, to some extent.
Empathy is also deeply intertwined with ethics.
Fundamentally. John Donne's famous line, "Never send to know for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee," speaks to this. Another's pain becomes one's own, creating a shared human experience.
It underlies moral judgments.
Fuels empathic anger, which John Stuart Mill called the guardian of justice, driving us to intervene for victims. By late childhood, empathy expands beyond individuals to understanding the chronic distress of entire groups, like the poor or the oppressed.
The tragic lack of empathy in crime is particularly disturbing.
It's shockingly common in rapists, child molesters, and perpetrators of family violence. It allows them to justify their horrific actions with twisted lies like, women really want to be raped, or I'm not hurting the child.
But there are treatments trying to address this.
Yes, new treatments like perspective-taking therapy in Vermont prisons, where offenders read victim accounts and watch videos, have shown promising results, actually having recidivism rates. It proves that even in extreme cases, empathy can potentially be learned or relearned.
But for some, like psychopaths or sociopaths,
There is a chilling incapacity to feel empathy, compassion, or remorse. They are notoriously charming on the surface, but are completely cold and manipulative underneath. Pharaoh, the 17-year-old gang member, chillingly showed off his nightmare face that, as he describes, says he doesn't care about anything, not your life and not his.
terrifying. And this might stem from a neural defect.
It's possible. Brainwave studies of psychopaths show no distinctive pattern or quicker response to emotional words like kill versus neutral words, suggesting a disruption in circuits between the verbal cortex and the limbic brain.
Though, disturbingly, an opportunistic lack of empathy can be seen as a virtue in some roles.
Twistedly, yes, like a bad cop, a corporate raider, or even a torturer, allowing them to perform tasks without moral inhibition.
Okay, finally we come to the fifth domain, handling relationships.
Yes, this is truly the art of relationships, the sophisticated skill in managing emotions, not just in ourselves, but in others. It's the foundational ability that undergirds popularity, effective leadership, and overall interpersonal effectiveness.
A key social competence here is how well we express our own feelings, governed by these display rules.
Right, Paul Ekman's term. The social consensus about what feelings can be properly shown in public cultures vary tremendously. Remember the Japanese students watching the horrific film?
Minimal reaction with authority present, but distressed when alone.
Exactly. It's about managing your emotional presentation according to social context.
And emotions, incredibly, can be contagious.
Oh, definitely. Ulf Dimberg's research showed that when people view a smiling or angry face, their own faces unconsciously show subtle muscle changes mirroring that mood. Mood transfer often goes from the more forceful to the more passive person.
Some people are more susceptible.
Yes, those with perhaps innate sensitivity or more easily triggered autonomic nervous systems, they can be more impressionable and often more empathic.
As John Cacioppo notes, just seeing someone express an emotion can evoke that mood.
Whether you realize you mimic the facial expression or not, this mood synchrony is a constant dance between people that determines whether you feel an interaction went well or not. It's why we feel good or bad about an interaction, often before we can even put our finger on why.
This invisible dance leads to rapport.
Yes, often mirrored by tightly orchestrated physical movements, nods, shifts, leans, even rocking in swivel chairs at the same rhythm. This coordination of moods is the adult version of mother-infant attunement.
That deep, unspoken connection.
Exactly, and it's a distinct mark of powerful leaders. How deftly people carry out this emotional synchrony is a key determinant of their interpersonal effectiveness,
Beyond this, there's organizational savvy.
which includes social analysis, the ability to detect and have insights about others' feelings, motives, and concerns. This subtle knowledge can lead to deep intimacy and strong rapport, and is essential for therapists, counselors, and even gifted novelists who portray human emotions so well.
These skills are the stuff of interpersonal polish.
Absolutely. The necessary ingredients for charm, social success, and even charisma. People adept in social intelligence are often natural leaders who can artfully express collective sentiment and guide groups toward shared goals.
They're described as emotionally nourishing people.
Yeah, they leave others feeling good and energized. You just feel better being around them.
But there's also the painful reality of social incompetence, like Cecil, the brilliant linguist.
Right. Brilliant, but incapable of the most routine social exchange, especially with women. He constantly feared nothing he said would be interesting and often laughed at awkward moments. Just felt socially paralyzed.
Children who are off in social skills, often misread unspoken roles, appear strange to playmates.
And inadvertently send uneasy messages. They also tend to do poorly in school, not due to lack of intelligence, but because of the anxiety and bewilderment that results from their social awkwardness.
That moment of joining a group can be tough.
Very. Popular children show sensitivity to others' concerns and maintain connection, while social outcasts often fail to notice, interpret, and respond to emotional and interpersonal cues.
The opposite of this incompetence is emotional brilliance or emotional judo.
Yeah, that remarkable ability to calm rage in others. One powerful strategy is to first distract the angry person, then genuinely empathize with their feelings, and then gently draw them into an alternative, more positive focus.
Like that Japanese old man with the drunk laborer on the train.
Classic example. He calmly approached, empathized, shifted the focus to Persimmons and his dead wife, and the drunk ended up sobbing in remorse. Masterful.
And finally, a word on gender differences in emotional expression.
Yes. While boys and girls are overtly aggressive equally at age 10, by 13, girls become more adept at artful aggressive tactics like ostracism and vicious gossip,
Relational aggression.
while boys tend to remain more confrontational and physical.
Different play styles, too.
Generally, yes. Girls typically play in small, intimate groups, emphasizing cooperation, while boys play in larger, more competitive groups. This shows up in how they react to injury. Boys often expect the injured to stop crying and get out of the way. Girls stop the game to help.
Carol Gilligan's work highlights this.
Yes, boys' pride in lone, tough-minded independence versus girls' strong focus on connection and relationships. On average, women are more empathic, their faces are easier to read, and they tend to experience emotions with greater intensity and volatility than men.
While boys are often culturally conditioned
To minimize vulnerability, guilt, fear, and hurt. These ingrained contrasts in emotional schooling foster very different skills and expressions between the sexes.
Okay. Now let's turn our attention to emotional intelligence in action. We'll explore its impact on our most intimate relationships, particularly marriage, its vital role in the workplace, and its profound, often underestimated connections to our physical health and overall well-being.
Starting with toxic relationships, marriage serves as a powerful microcosm. When spouses adopt a pessimistic stance, they become incredibly prone to emotional hijackings.
They stay upset longer.
Yes, they tend to stay disturbed once an emotional episode begins, resorting to criticism and contempt, which of course fuels defensiveness and stonewalling in their partner. It becomes a vicious cycle.
This is particularly stark in the case of violent husbands.
Sadly, yes, they often think like schoolyard bullies, tending to misread even neutral actions by their wives as hostile, thereby justifying their own violence.
Like a wife talking to another man triggers outrage.
Exactly. That can trigger thoughts of indignation and outrage, leading to what Gottman calls incompetent behavioral responses, a clinical term for physical assault.
This often leads to flooding.
Yes, Gottman's term for susceptibility to frequent emotional distress. We're talking about a heart rate increase of 10 or more beats per minute from calm levels, which can jump by as many as 30 beats per minute in a single heartbeat during an emotional hijacking.
Wow, physiologically overwhelmed.
Totally. Adrenaline pumps, muscles tense, hard to breathe. It's a swamp of toxic feelings, making rational discussion utterly impossible. When one or both partners are flooded, productive conversation is simply off the table.
The consequences are dire. Disintegration of self-awareness, self-control, empathy.
Ability to soothe oneself or each other, inevitably leading to relationship breakdown and often divorce.
Interestingly, the research suggests that men often appear to be the vulnerable sex in marriage in this context.
It seems so. Husbands, far more than wives, tend to find marital disagreements unpleasant, even aversive. Wives, on the other hand, often don't mind the squabbles as much, as they're often pursuing their role as emotional managers, trying to engage and resolve disagreements.
Which creates an unfortunate dynamic.
Yes, an asymmetry. As wives criticize more, trying to engage their partners, husbands tend to stonewall or withdraw emotionally,
The wife then ups the volume.
perhaps adding contempt, which triggers the husband's innocent victim or righteous indignation thoughts, leading to his flooding. To protect himself from this overwhelming feeling, he stonewalls even more.
Which then triggers flooding in his wife.
Exactly. It's an escalating cycle that easily spins out of control, fueled by emotional misunderstanding and physiological overwhelm.
This highlights how crucial calming down is for resolving conflict.
Absolutely fundamental. When either partner is in the midst of an emotional hijacking, nothing gets resolved positively. Learning to self-soothe and recover quickly from flooding allows for clarity of thought and speech, which is a fundamental step for any progress in a relationship. Without, you're just swimming in that swamp of toxic feelings.
Okay, moving beyond personal relationships to the workplace, we see emotional intelligence play an equally vital role. Consider airline crashes.
Yeah, a staggering 80% are due to preventable pilot mistakes, often stemming from a critical lack of teamwork, communication, and cooperation in the cockpit.
So now social intelligence is emphasized in pilot training.
Yes, alongside technical skills. The cockpit, in essence, is a microcosm of any high-stakes organization where teamwork is critical.
The costs of emotional deficiencies in the workplace are substantial, even if less dramatic than a crash.
Absolutely. They manifest as low morale, intimidated workers, arrogant bosses, decreased productivity, missed deadlines and mistakes, and high employee turnover. As one consultant bluntly put it, stress makes people stupid.
Because upset people can't think clearly.
Exactly. Emotionally upset people cannot remember, attend, learn, or make decisions clearly. Their working memory is compromised, directly impacting performance.
Conversely, the benefits of emotional intelligence at work are immense.
Huge. Being attuned to colleagues' feelings, handling disagreements constructively, even achieving those flow states while working all boost productivity and job satisfaction.
Leadership becomes persuasion, not domination.
Precisely. And for genuine career satisfaction, recognizing our deepest feelings about our work, what truly engages and motivates us, is absolutely essential.
These emotional aptitudes are becoming even more critical due to changes in the workplace, like the rise of knowledge workers.
Yes, Peter Drucker's term. Individuals whose productivity depends not just on individual effort, but on their efforts being coordinated as part of organizational teams. When people collaborate, they essentially form a group IQ.
Group IQ.
And how well they accomplish their tasks is largely determined by how high that collective IQ is. The single most important element in group intelligence isn't the individual academic IQs, but their collective emotional intelligence.
The key is social harmony.
Right. This ability to harmonize, to work together effectively, is what, all other things being equal, makes one group especially talented and productive, and another, with equally bright members, perform poorly.
The Bell Labs study is a prime example.
Perfect example. A study of star performers at Bell Labs, a world-famous scientific think tank. While all the engineers and scientists there were at the top on academic IQ tests, the stars stood out, not because of higher academic IQ, but because of their emotional IQ.
How so?
They were better at motivating themselves and incredibly adept at leveraging informal networks into effective ad hoc teams. They understood the social landscape.
Mastering communications webs, expertise networks, and trust networks.
Crucially, trust networks. Being an expert doesn't automatically mean you're trusted with sensitive information. The stars were those who had thick connections on all networks. They were widely trusted and highly skilled in cooperation.
And they excelled at teamwork, consensus building, perspective taking.
Persuasiveness, promoting cooperation, avoiding conflict, initiative, self-management, all facets of emotional intelligence, demonstrating its direct impact on professional success.
The implication is clear. These emotional intelligence skills will become ever more important in corporate life.
Critical. Cultivating them may make a critical competitive difference. Corporations that boost their collective emotional intelligence are far more likely to thrive, if not simply survive, in today's complex landscape.
Lastly, let's explore emotional well-being and health. Sadly, modern medical care often lacks emotional intelligence.
It often does. Medical personnel too often ignore patients' emotional reactions, despite mounting evidence of emotion's profound role in disease vulnerability and recovery. Institutional imperatives can lead to indifference, making patients feel dismissed and unheard.
Which itself can impede healing.
Absolutely. This neglect is particularly glaring given the groundbreaking insights from psychoneuroimmunology, PNI.
The field studying links between mind, nervous system, and immune system.
Right. How our thoughts and feelings literally connect to our body's defenses. Dr. David Felton's research, for example, revealed a direct physical pathway. Specific nerve endings from the autonomic nervous system directly touch immune cells like lymphocytes and macrophages.
Nerves talking to immune cells.
Directly. These nerve cells release neurotransmitters, chemical messengers, to regulate those immune cells. Removing these nerve endings from lymph nodes, or the spleen in animals, caused a huge drop in their immune response to viruses.
Wow.
Proving that our nervous system, deeply intertwined with our emotions, is essential for proper immune function. This isn't just theory, it's a measurable physiological connection.
Despite such compelling evidence, many physicians remain skeptical.
They do, often citing concerns about the range of changes or subjective patient complaints. However, proponents argue that objective measures, like physician evaluations and medical tests and powerful prospective studies where emotional state is assessed before disease onset, provide compelling proof.
Like scared surgical patients having worse outcomes.
Exactly. They bleed too much, they have more infections and complications, they have a harder time recovering. Their emotional state directly impacts their physical recovery.
The impact of negative emotions is particularly well documented. Anger, especially chronic hostility.
Puts people at risk for heart disease. Dr. Redford Williams' research at Duke found physicians with the highest hostility scores in medical school were 7 times as likely to have died by age 50.
7 times. Stronger predictor than smoking or high blood pressure.
Stronger predictor. It directly correlates with the extent of coronary artery disease and is particularly lethal for those with existing heart disease, doubling or tripling the death risk after a heart attack.
And it's chronic hostility, not just occasional anger.
Right. That deep mistrust, cynicism, tendency to cut others down. Stress also has broad negative effects, as Bruce McEwen outlined, compromising immune function, speeding cancer metastasis, increasing viral vulnerability,
Exacerbating plaque, diabetes, asthma, ulcers.
even damaging the hippocampus, affecting memory. McEwen calls it wear and tear on the entire nervous system.
Sheldon Cohen's study on stress and colds provided direct evidence, too.
Very direct. More psychological stress meant people were significantly more likely to catch a cold when exposed to the virus, 47%, versus 27% for those with little stress. A clear link between emotional state and physical vulnerability.
And depression.
Severely impedes medical recovery, significantly heightening the risk of death, particularly for frail patients with severe conditions. Its symptoms, like loss of appetite and lethargy, are often tragically mistaken for other physical diseases, delaying crucial treatment.
But treating depression helps medical outcomes.
Measurably improves outcomes, leading to fewer disabled days and better adaptation to impairments. It's a vital component of holistic care.
But there's also the flip side. The powerful medical benefits of positive feelings.
Absolutely. Just as chronic distress is toxic, positive emotions can be wonderfully tonic. While not a cure-all, their edge is subtle but consistently measurable.
Optimism, for example.
Shows compelling benefits. Of 25 pessimistic heart attack patients in one study, a staggering 21 died 8 years later, compared to only 6 of 25 optimists.
Wow. Better predictor than medical risk factors.
In that study, yes. Optimistic bypass surgery patients also had faster recoveries and fewer complications.
Hope also demonstrates profound healing power.
Yes, spinal injury patients with more hope consistently gained greater physical mobility, pushing past perceived limitations. And social support is an incredibly powerful factor in mortality risk.
Like the bone marrow transplant study.
54% survival with strong emotional support versus a mere 20% without. Elderly heart attack patients with 2 or more reliable emotional supports were twice as likely to survive longer than a year. Human connection truly heals.
Therapy combined with medical treatment often leads to better outcomes, too.
Yes, James Pennebaker's findings suggest this. Perhaps the most powerful demonstration is Dr. David Spiegel's breast cancer support groups at Stanford. Women with advanced metastatic breast cancer lived an average of 37 additional months in support groups versus 19 months without.
A gain beyond medication alone.
Truly remarkable. As one patient put it, compassion is good medicine.
And finally, relaxation techniques.
Widely and clinically used to ease symptoms of chronic illnesses like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, arthritis, chronic pain. Practices like Jon Kabat-Zinn's mindfulness and yoga can offer significant reprieve, teaching the body and mind to calm themselves, directly impacting physical well-being.
The call to action here is clear. Medical care neglecting emotional reality is inadequate.
Simply incomplete. It's time for medicine to methodically use the profound emotion health link, making a more compassionate and truly effective medicine available to us all.
So we've seen the profound, far-reaching impact of emotional intelligence across every facet of our lives. But what does this mean for the next generation, for the children who are shaping our future? Our final section, emotional literacy. A path forward for children in society explores how we can proactively cultivate these absolutely essential skills from the earliest stages of life.
Because childhood is truly the primary emotional school. The family, in particular, serves as our first school for emotional learning, where we absorb fundamental messages about ourselves, how others react to our feelings, and how to express our hopes, fears, and frustrations. These early lessons lay the emotional blueprint for our entire lives.
This is starkly illustrated by Leslie's video game scenario, even at just 5 years old. Her parents' overly eager attempts to help her with a new game quickly devolved into contradictory orders and snapped commands.
Leaving Leslie sobbing softly alone with her anguish. Her parents, caught in their own frustration, didn't seem to notice or care about her emotional state.
In such moments, children learn deep, often unspoken lessons. Leslie might conclude no one cares about her feelings, or her distress is a burden.
Exactly. These repeated, small emotional exchanges, perhaps even more than dramatic single events, gradually mold a child's emotional expectations about relationships and their overall outlook on life. Some parents are undeniably gifted emotional teachers, while others, tragically, are atrocious.
Research from the University of Washington team, observing parents like Leslie's, found vastly different parenting styles. Some were contemptuous.
Showing no respect for the child's feelings, being harsh and punitive. Others, however, acted as emotional coaches or mentors,
Taking feelings seriously, trying to understand.
helping them find positive ways to soothe themselves and navigate their emotions.
The impact of emotionally adept parenting is extraordinarily sweeping. Children with such parents not only get along better with them, but also handle their own emotions more effectively, soothe themselves when upset, get upset less often.
Biologically, they are more relaxed, lower stress hormone levels. Socially, more popular, better liked by peers, seen as more socially skilled by teachers, fewer behavioral problems.
And here's a crucial point. These children also show higher achievement scores in math and reading, even when IQ is held constant.
That's huge. It demonstrates that emotional competence isn't just about feeling good. It's directly linked to academic success, preparing children for both learning and life in a much more holistic way.
T. Barry Brazelton's Heart Start diagnostic tests for babies.
Yes, observing how 8-month-olds responded to being asked to put two blocks together. Hopeful babies, who'd received approval and encouragement, expected to succeed, eagerly explored, completed the task, and looked for praise.
Tell me how great I am.
Exactly. Babies from bleak or neglectful homes, however, often showed a hangdog demeanor, already expecting to fail and showing little initiative.
Brazelton identified 5 core capacities instilled early: confidence, curiosity, intentionality, self-control, relatedness.
All the small, repeated emotional exchanges between parent and child mold the child's emotional expectations, setting their internal compass for future interactions.
Unfortunately, aggression is often a learned legacy.
Sadly, yes. Aggressiveness in childhood, like Jimmy the bully who was in jail by 16, is a strong predictor for future trouble. The family life of such aggressive children often involves parents alternating neglect with harsh, capricious punishments, inadvertently making children combative and paranoid.
And they have a perceptual flaw.
Many do. They tend to misperceive neutral acts as hostile, imagining peers to be more antagonistic than they actually are, and then overreact. Once caught in anger, they can think of only one way to react: lashing out. Their problem-solving becomes one-dimensional and destructive.
Failing to learn self-control.
Often by second grade, relying instead on force. They're often disliked quickly by peers. Studies show up to half of disruptive first graders become delinquents. For girls, antisocial behavior often leads to teen pregnancy rather than violence.
No single pathway, but these forces intensify the likelihood.
Greatly. And speaking of learned legacies, trauma can tragically warp empathy.
Like Martin hitting his crying playmate.
Exactly. His brutal response mirrored horrifying lessons from home. Abused toddlers often react to others' distress with fear, anger, or physical attack, treating others as they've been treated instead of concern. This devastating failure of empathy often repeats across generations.
The lasting imprint of trauma is profound. Some chit and the Purdy game after the school shooting.
A chilling example: the children's hypervigilance, avoiding evil areas, intrusive memory of the central violent action, clear symptoms of PTSD. Holocaust survivors, decades later, still experience nightmares, showing how deeply these experiences are etched.
This reflects learned helplessness.
Right, like the rats who couldn't stop the shocks developing brain changes. For children in trauma, that feeling of helplessness is palpable and deeply damaging. They learn their efforts don't matter.
And there are actual neural changes linked to trauma.
Significant ones. The locus ceruleus and amygdala are closely linked, and changes in these circuits underlie PTSD symptoms, chronic anxiety, fear, hyperarousal, indelible traumatic memories. Vietnam vets with PTSD had 40% fewer catecholamine-stopping receptors.
Brain stuck in perpetual high gear.
Exactly. Constantly reacting as if in danger. This brain change fundamentally interferes with emotional relearning. The amygdala hijacking strengthens the fear pathway, making it incredibly hard to learn normal, calm responses.
But healing is possible. The prefrontal cortex can help.
Yes, the prefrontal cortex can actively suppress the amygdala's fear commands. Richard Davidson found more activity in the left prefrontal cortex correlated with faster recovery from learned fear, suggesting a cortical role in letting go of learned distress.
Healing also comes from gaining mastery.
Like the children killing Purdy in their games, reclaiming agency. And, as psychiatrist Judith Lewis Herman outlines, trauma recovery involves 3 crucial stages: attaining safety, mourning the loss, and reestablishing a normal life. The emotional brain can gradually learn life need not be a constant emergency.
All of this raises a critical question. Is temperament destiny? Are we just born a certain way?
Well, some innate predispositions, calm versus testy, are given at birth. Jerome Kagan's research on the neurochemistry of timidity suggests highly excitable amygdala circuits make some prone to fearfulness, shying away from the unfamiliar.
Linked to higher stress hormones, more reactive nervous systems.
Yes, higher resting blood pressure, dilated pupils, higher risk for anxiety disorders later.
But the truly hopeful news is that temperament isn't fixed, like Aunt June.
Aunt June. Despite enduring horrific years in a prison camp, a stroke, paralysis, she maintained an incredibly cheerful temperament. Laughed when she fell, only commenting, "Well, at least I can walk again." Remarkable resilience.
Richard Davidson's brainwave studies support this flexibility.
They do. Stronger left frontal activity correlates with sociability, cheerfulness, good moods, self-confidence, lower lifetime risk for depression, lower activity found in clinically depressed individuals. But critically, it's not just a fixed state.
So the crucial takeaway, temperament can indeed be tempered.
Yes. Emotional lessons in childhood profoundly impact temperament, amplifying or muting innate predispositions. The brain's remarkable plasticity means experiences sculpt neural pathways, strengthening or weakening tendencies.
Kagan's own research showed timid children could change.
Absolutely. About 1 in 3 infants born timid lost their timidity by kindergarten. Parental influence was massive. A protective philosophy shielding from upsets exacerbated fearfulness.
Deprive them of learning opportunities.
Whereas a learn-to-adapt philosophy, allowing manageable doses of uncertainty, not rushing to soothe every upset, helped fearful children become braver. Emotional capacities are not fixed. They can be improved through learning.
This brings us to a crucial systemic approach. Emotional literacy, actively teaching these skills.
Because the problem is clear and urgent. A troubling worldwide trend of emotionally troubled children. More lonely, depressed, angry, unruly, nervous, impulsive, aggressive than the last generation.
The statistics for the U.S. in the 90s were stark. Highest juvenile arrest rate for violent crimes ever, quadrupled teen murder rates, tripled teen suicide rates.
Tripled rates of venereal disease. These are barometers of a sea change, a new kind of toxicity seeping into childhood. And these problems are universal, affecting all income and racial groups.
Uri Bronfenbrenner said, "External stresses have become so great that even strong families are falling apart."
And inadvertently depriving children of essential competence and moral character.
So the solution is emotional literacy as prevention. Our current wars on teen pregnancy, drugs, violence often come too late.
They're crisis intervention. We need psychological inoculation, early intervention, building resilience from the ground up. Long-term studies show resilient children, despite hardship, consistently share key emotional skills. Emotional competence can be decisive.
And this means schooling the emotions formally, like the Nueva Learning Center's self-science class.
Yes, starting with a roll call, where students state a mood number, fostering self-awareness.
And the cooperation squares game.
Silent teamwork, with the teacher as emotional coach, guiding tone, clarifying intent. He's not criticizing, just helping.
Yeah.
Focus on resolving conflict before it escalates. Teaching interpretation and constructive response.
Learning assertiveness, active listening.
Even angry boys learn to assert views without blaming, increasing mastery of conflict resolution, a tangible shift.
In New Haven schools, they identify feelings from pictures, use a feelings cube.
Building emotional vocabulary, fostering empathy. Older grades get explicit lessons on empathy, impulse control, anger management, with tools like the stoplight poster for impulse control.
John Muir Elementary's mailbox for anonymous complaints.
Allowing safe expression. Class discussions explore solutions, correcting one-track thinking that sees conflict as the only option, teaching brainstorming.
Key principles for effective programs. Start early, age-appropriate, run throughout school years, coordinate school, home, community.
Parents coached as emotional mentors. Head Start shows beneficial long-term effects. Crucial transition points are ages 6-11 and puberty buttressing ability to build relationships, navigate crises, nurture self-confidence.
Emotional literacy as violence prevention is urgent. The Resolving Conflict Creatively program in NYC.
Teaches choices beyond passivity or aggression, emphasizing the futility of violence, replacing it with concrete skills.
Exercises like identifying one step to settle conflict, role-playing.
Extending beyond the classroom, training student mediators to handle fights, taunts, interracial incidents, empowering youth as peacemakers.
Angel Perez said it changed my way of thinking.
The broader mission.
Yeah.
Skills to head off violence are inseparable from full emotional competence, recognizing feelings, handling impulse grief, empathy. It increases caring among the kids.
The PATH-S curriculum, parents and teachers helping students.
Designed for those at risk, but given to all to avoid stigma. Teaches impulse control, improving attention, grades, recognizing feelings, 50 lessons, monitoring self-others, recognizing true hostility versus self-attributed hostility.
Yes. Reducing misinterpretation.
Exactly. The W.T. Grant Foundation distilled the active ingredients of effective programs. Essential cognitive skills: self-awareness, personal decision-making, managing feelings, handling stress.
And crucial interpersonal skills. Empathy, communication, self-acceptance, personal responsibility, assertiveness, group dynamics, conflict resolution. Truly life skills.
And importantly, for children's depression, medication isn't a clear alternative to therapy or prevention. Metabolism differs, some drugs failed or had risks. Holistic approaches prioritizing emotional learning are key.
So, after all this, does emotional literacy truly make a difference? Tim Shriver's story of Lamont.
Poignant. Lamont learned SOCS situation, options, consequence, solutions in high school. Years later, shot at 26, lying wounded, he whispered, "Shrive, when I get out of here, I'm going to use the SOCS method."
A parallel hint that may be.
Maybe early education could have helped. Teacher testimonials from New Haven, student avoided unwed motherhood, mother-daughter screaming stopped, a girl who fought now engages constructively. Clear behavioral shifts.
And the direct data. Suspensions for fighting plummeted as classes were phased in.
A dramatic reduction. This powerfully reinforces that emotional literacy goes hand in hand with cultivating character, moral development, citizenship. A ripple effect.
So what does this all mean for you, our listener? We've covered a lot of ground today, from the unexpected power of a bus driver's mood to the intricate neural pathways of fear.
From the surprising limitations of IQ to the profound impact of emotional skills on our health, relationships, careers.
The core message is clear. Emotional intelligence isn't just a nice-to-have. It is a crucial master aptitude affecting literally every aspect of our lives.
It's about so much more than cognitive smarts. It's about navigating the complex, often turbulent emotional currents that truly shape our destiny.
And it brings us back to that initial hook. Emotions are powerful forces, capable of creating both profound tragedy, like Robles' rage,
And quiet, positive transformations, like that bus driver transmuting sullenness into smiles.
We've also seen the troubling trends in emotional well-being among children, the rising violence, a stark picture.
But amidst these immense challenges, the evidence from emotional literacy programs, from self-science to paths, offers a real quantum of hope.
These programs powerfully demonstrate these competencies can be taught, learned, cultivated. They make a tangible difference.
The question then becomes not if these skills are important, but when we will collectively decide to prioritize teaching them.
Exactly. So for you, our listener, we leave you with this provocative thought. Given the crises we face today, the emotional turmoil, the rising violence, the mental health challenges among youth, and given the undeniable hope held out by these emotional literacy programs,
Shouldn't we be teaching these most essential skills for life to every child in every community?
now more than ever, think about how you might apply these insights in your own life, and perhaps even how you might advocate for such crucial learning in your own communities.